Like we're getting some people coming in and some participants joining. So we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Just to let everyone know, we are recording this webinar today and we will have this on demand following for anyone. But welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is an incredibly busy time of year and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here. We are excited to have you for our webinar. The AI holidays are here. From agentic commerce to adversarial attacks. Are you ready? I am Michelle DiDomenico, a marketing director here at Darwinium. Quick housekeeping item before we jump in. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A box. I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the conversation, and we'll address as many as we can during the session. And again, at the end, we will follow up with you for any of those that we do not get to during the webinar today. But let's go ahead and get started. I know that this holiday season is shaping up to be especially unique. Agentic AI is accelerating. While it's not fully mainstream yet, it is growing in awareness, experimentation, and definitely in curiosity. Consumers are testing what they can do with these tools, how to discover the best deals, how to optimize their shopping journeys, how to automate the hunt for sales and promotions. And we know whenever something new and shiny enters the picture, it inevitably brings its own set of fraud and security challenges. So we know the fraudsters are experimenting too, and that's why today's conversation is so important. We are joined by some of the greatest minds in the fraud and security space. These experts represent different industries, business models, holiday season pressures. Each of them is seeing something a little different in the market right now, and together they're going to help paint a picture of what's happening and what they think is coming next. We're fortunate to have these four phenomenal panelists with us today who are living this in real time and each facing a different version of the same problem. So I'll go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves. We have Ben, who is the VP of Product and one of our co-founders here at Darwinium. Ben?
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ben Davey. As you can probably tell from the accent, I am from Australia. I work on the product and engineering side of Darwinium. An honor to be here. And Darwinium is really a product that the founding team have been working towards our entire careers, sort of focused on the pain points, and agentic AI is no different. So great to be here.
Thanks, Ben. We have John, who is the head of fraud prevention at Apollo.
Hey everyone, I'm John, head of fraud prevention at Apollo. I also lead AppSec, which is convenient since most of my days is spent hunting down bots and building a strategy to deflect them where they shouldn't be. So I feel right at home.
Awesome. Thank you, John. We have Connor, who's running the software engineering trust and safety team at Udemy.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Connor. I'm just coming from Udemy, and I work as part of the trust and safety team. We help Udemy make sure that people say who they are, when they are, and making sure we have good accounts on board.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have Anbu, the VP of engineering at Discogs.
Hey everyone, I'm Anbu, VP of Engineering and also responsible for the security aspect of it. And my job is actually to make sure that our complete collector's journey is intact. We're providing them the right experience in a secure way. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. I know this is who you're all excited to hear from today. I'm going to hand this over to you, Ben, to start us off and take us through the current threat landscape.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Well, welcome everyone. So as you're probably all aware, one of the biggest shifts happening across every digital industry right now is the rise of agentic commerce, where AI agents act on behalf of consumers. So you have AI-infused browsers like Comet and Atlas, which are no longer just assistants. What they can do is browse, compare, authenticate, transact, and complete tasks end to end, almost like a remote control for our digital lives. So shopping, banking, booking travel, managing telco plans, moving money, all of it can now be delegated to an agent. So what does that mean for the months ahead? It means consumers will increasingly hand off major parts of their journeys to AI agents. And that means that friction is disappearing. So less manual searching and typing, more find it, book it, buy it, manage it, all on autopilot. And for business, this brings huge opportunity. It means faster decisions, higher conversion, fewer drop-offs, and more personalized and dynamic offers. But the flip side is also real. So the same reduction in friction can apply to bad automation as well. AI agents make life easier for customers, but they can also lower the barrier for fraudsters and adversarial automation. So the message is simple. The AI shopping season, the AI travel season, the AI banking season, they're not coming, they're already here. Consumers should enjoy the convenience, and businesses need to rethink how they enable trust and defend these agentic interactions. The wave is happening now, and it's reshaping digital journeys across every sector. Whoop. Okay. So the opportunity for business is huge, but so is the fraud surface. So there's this idea that simply blocking bots is no longer fit for purpose because legitimate agents and their users will get blocked. Instead, we need to distinguish trusted agentic interactions from the risky or the malicious ones. Um, Here are a couple of the key risks that businesses need to be aware of. One is that AI-infused browsers and cloud-based agents can present as human users. So they've got the same IPs, the same screens, the same resolution, and that makes detection quite a lot harder. On payments, if an agent buys something on behalf of a user that wasn't fit for purpose or without explicit consent, you risk chargebacks and customer distrust. So at the point of financial risk, you might want to insert higher friction or some sort of human confirmation. Thirdly, the surface area is massive, right? So bad actors are doing everything from amplifying phishing campaigns. They're using AI to upskill and adapt their attacks. But then you also have things like bots that are masquerading as legitimate agents. So I guess my last point there is letting your guard down is dangerous. There have and will be malicious bots masquerading, doing everything from account takeovers, checkout and returns fraud, or even content scraping, as John may allude further down the track, if the right detections and remediations aren't in place. So from a fraud team's perspective, the key takeaway is now isn't just, is this a bot, but is this agent trusted, authorized, acting with intent consistent with the user? And to do that, we need intent-based decisioning, behavioral context, velocity checks, account linkage, and also device binding. So this idea of having an adaptive bot policy emerges that encompasses bots, security, and also fraud. So all three of those really need to come together to create this coherent experience. Over to you, Michelle.
All right. Yeah, I think we wanted to get started with a first question here. And I think just to kind of warm everyone up, to all the panelists, what unique challenges do you expect to see this holiday season?
Actually, we can start with Ambu.
Yeah, happy to. But the unique challenges this year is, I think, with the bots coming in, the rules that we have, either it's IP addresses or bot detections, or even solving the reCAPTCHAs, is no longer an issue. The threshold for entries is so much lower that there's so much influx of traffic is coming in, and to be able to address that and provide a secure environment is continues to be a massive challenge for us. And the account aging and account takeovers, they might be old, but they still continue to peak up at the time of the holiday seasons. And then, yeah, I think with every year, there's always new something that comes over.
Totally. I think on my side, what is crazy is just witnessing, especially this holiday season, is witnessing the constant evolution of our adversaries. I guess as Darwinium's namesake suggests, it's this whole idea of evolution, and we're seeing adaptation happening on the adversarial side in hours, hours and days, not months. So we're really seeing this evolution happen in real time. You go and plug something up, and your adversaries have found ways to adapt really, really quickly. So it's just a really interesting, it's a nail biting time, but it's also an exciting time, right?
I'd agree with that. I think, I confidently know that the adversaries that my team is adapting to deflect, they essentially are running keep alive scripts on all different paths of how to hit our site in multiple steps so that they're able to figure out when we adjust a threshold for timing. Um, we're watching certain abuse schemes pop up again in matter of hours, or in some cases less, because it appears as if they're building backup plans for when we address like the most obvious set of requests or path, whatever you want to think of it as. They know that we'll probably catch wind of it. So I think the biggest challenge for my team, we're lucky that it's not exactly tooling anymore. We have a lot of capabilities at our fingertips, but it's really more about how can we move faster? How can we maybe do the exact same thing that they're doing on the application, right? Attack ourselves as we do, on a regular basis, but in a more automated fashion, do something to find those risky paths, particularly if customers aren't super engaged with that exact behavior, and just make it more expensive. So we're bringing more product strategy and growth teams into fraud strategy discussions than we have in the past. And we need to become more nimble. And I think that's really what we're working on. So time resource and human resources is still a constraint, but we're going to get faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the keys to it is having visibility, knowing what your adversaries are up to, but then also being able to react. So, I mean, like you said, they're looking at certain points. There's an element of not wanting to expose all of your cards on the table at the same time so that they don't adapt too fast, but knowing that they're going to adapt quickly is a real interesting point. So I think that's an interesting segue just to the
Perfect
to
segue.
the to the next point. So talking on the side of observability, this slide shows a typical digital customer journey. So from browsing a website to creating an account, logging in, changing details, checking out, and finally making a payment. And every business has some version of this flow. The problem is that most security tools today only protect one part of it. Conversely, your traditional bot controls might be overzealous in protecting all of it, so blocking some of your wanted agent traffic. We typically have one tool for bots at the top of the funnel, another for account security, and another for checkout. And each one of these only sees a single moment in time. And that creates blind spots. And as we're increasingly starting to become aware, fraudsters don't attack one step, they attack the sequence of steps. And so when your tools aren't connected, fraud slips through the cracks. So as John alluded, continuous visibility is essential for telling good agent traffic apart from bad bot traffic, because modern automation, both legitimate and malicious, looks increasingly similar at the surface level. So static bot rules break down quickly as things like AI-driven bots rotate fingerprints, mimic human behavior, evolve their signatures, while legitimate AI agents acting on behalf of customers might resemble automation in its early steps. So by observing traffic across the entire journey, so I think through things like device signals, network patterns, behavioral cues, and the sequence of actions, um, you build the context needed to separate trusted, purposeful interactions from automated abuse. And this journey level visibility shows intent. So did the agent browse naturally before acting, or did it just jump straight into high risk steps? Did the behavior remain consistent, or did it shift after logging? Um, So with continuous signals feeding your decisioning, adaptive bot policies can dynamically relax controls for trusted agent-driven flows, or they can tighten or escalate when behaviors diverge into risky territory. So having the ongoing feedback loop not only improves accuracy, but ensures that your bot strategy evolves at the same pace as the threats. So when we look at having a multi-part policy approach across the journey, I sort of think of it in three parts of the way that you might treat traffic. The first one is obviously permitting, so allowing low-risk interactions such as basic browsing or product research, even if they are automated, because you might be losing legitimate agent-driven traffic if you block everything. That said, you should be keeping tabs on the velocity of this, and I'm sure John's got a number of things to say there. I mean, if you let all agentic traffic through, you risk you have the risk of things like site scraping. So it's potentially where your competitors could be getting intel on your product lines, or if you've got high value content, basically stealing it. The second piece of that is this idea of verification. So basically escalating to human confirmation or stronger checks when you've got an element of identity risk, payment risk, or you see those larger volumes of traffic appear. And then the last one being really what the legacy bot tools have been involved with, which is prevention, right? So blocking outright when you see clearly malicious automation, credential stuffing, scraping, things happening at high volume. So why this matters? If you simply block every automated request, then you might be blocking legitimate shopping agents, which can lead to lost revenue and a bad user experience. On the other hand, if you let everything through, you risk exposure to scraping, fraud, account takeover, and checkout fraud. So the journey-based model lets you differentiate. And by applying adaptive controls at different phases of the journey, you keep friction low when it matters, such as in points like product discovery or casual browsing, and you ramp it up when risk increases in places like login, checkout, and payment. So the goal here is to preserve conversion while maintaining security. So to really understand what an agent is doing across a customer journey, the first step is really being able to actually classify it, because not all automation is the same. Some traffic will come from legitimate agentic browsers like Comet or Atlas that are acting on behalf of users. Some will come from cloud-based automation services orchestrating high-volume scripted tasks. And some will come from purpose-built malicious bots trying to exploit business logic or to overwhelm your system. You can't really distinguish these categories from a single signal or an isolated event. So really what you need to do is harness multiple layers of data. So using things like device fingerprints to show whether an agent is self-declaring or hiding behind generic spoof profiles, network data that reveals whether the traffic's infrastructure matches what it claims to be, or whether it shows signs of proxies or automation frameworks. Looking at timing patterns that expose whether interactions look human or flow with machine-like precision. Behavioral biometrics are really interesting. They'll surface whether interactions are consistent with trusted users or part of a mass-scale automation. And then finally, looking at journey-level analysis that contextualizes each action within this broader set of sequences. So in summary, by aggregating these perspectives, you build a complete picture of what the agent is, how it behaves, and why it might be operating. And this allows you to separate legitimate agentic activity from harmful automation and apply adaptive policies that match the risk at each stage of the journey. I think it's important to also think a little bit about the fraud lifecycle. So in the world of AI agents and rapidly evolving bot traffic, the fraud management lifecycle becomes even more critical because the game of cat and mouse has accelerated so dramatically. So agentic browsers, automation frameworks, and malicious bots all are adapting their behaviors in real time. So they're modifying fingerprints, they're rotating infrastructure, and they're reshaping their journeys the moment that they encounter friction. And what this means is that static controls or fixed checkpoints in the customer journey are no longer effective. What you enforce at login today might be bypassed tomorrow by a more sophisticated agent, or a malicious bot may simply shift its attack to earlier or later in the flow. So to stay ahead, businesses need a life cycle that continuously redeploys, redetects, and refines, moving controls to the right place in the journey and adjusting decisions as these automated behaviors change. And just to do a plug on ourselves, I think this is really where Darwinium is uniquely positioned. So we are deployed at the customer's edge. And what we're able to do is observe AI agent and bot traffic across every interaction, continuously profile behaviors, and use machine learning and adversarial simulation to detect new automation patterns as they emerge. So instead of chasing bots after they've adapted, we update defenses in real time. So shifting policies, tuning thresholds, and proactively blocking harmful automation while allowing the legitimate traffic to flow smoothly. So as I mentioned, in a landscape where automation evolves, hourly, not yearly, this continuous and adaptive life cycle is really the only way to maintain trust while preserving the user experience. So all of this intelligence, so your journey visibility, the agent classification, the behavioral insights, it only really matters if you can actually deploy it quickly and consistently across your entire digital estate. The biggest challenge that most organizations face is really not a lack of data or ideas, but the inability to get protection live in all of the places where automation and fraud actually operate. And that's why Darwinium's deploy model is so important. With the CDN-based approach, we can sit at the edge of your infrastructure, right where that traffic first arrives, which makes it incredibly fast to roll out without having to rewire back-end systems or add heavy code. Because as we're all aware, a lot of your engineering team doesn't have the same KPIs as, say, the fraud or the cyber team. For teams that prefer more direct control, we also offer lightweight JavaScript tags, native mobile SDKs, and secured API services. So this gives you complete flexibility, this idea that you can deploy in the edge in minutes, enrich mobile traffic natively, and integrate deeply via APIs. So the result being full visibility across the entire customer journey, deployed in a way that's fast and as scalable as the threats that you're actually trying to stop. So just to go back to the edge, when we talk about deploying there, this is where the whole story sort of really comes together, especially if you're working or investing in a world-class CDN like Cloudflare, Akamai, or Amazon CloudFront. So the idea here is that these networks sit physically closer to your customers than any back-end system ever could, which means they're the perfect place to capture the entire customer journey with minimal latency. I think Cloudflare in particular gives us massive global reach, millisecond fast decisioning, and also the ability to run this logic directly inside that edge fabric. And this allows Darwinium to operate at the speed that traditional centrally hosted fraud tools just can't match. So instead of shipping data across the world to a single decision engine, we evaluate risk right where the traffic lands before it even touches your origin infrastructure. So that gives you lower latency, high performance, and dramatically better protection. And because everything is config driven and deployed directly through the CDN, integration is incredibly simple. So you get that full visibility of journeys across web, mobile, and APIs, but also while keeping things like your PII encrypted and stored on your infrastructure and not ours. So if you've already invested in a modern CDN, Darwinium doesn't replace that investment, it amplifies it, turning the edge into a real-time detection and protection layer that's as fast and as scalable as the internet itself. It's also really simple to get onto to actually set up deployment. So in the case of Cloudflare, for example, we're only a handful of configuration parameters away from being deployed on your website. So here you see on Cloudflare, we've essentially got an account ID. We've got a couple of namespaces that are used for KV stores. But the idea is that you can be up and running really quickly with that observability. Now that approach obviously isn't for everyone. So we also support things like multi and mixed CDN deployments, as well as lifecycle management through Terraform, if your infrastructure team has a different approach to managing that. Just lastly, I also wanted to sort of talk about how, let me just get my slides working. Wanted to talk about something I'm particularly excited about, because it changes how fast you can go from zero to full journey protection. And so what you see in front of you at the moment is our journey recorder. And the idea is pretty beautifully simple, right? So you're wanting to protect something like a registration, for example. And the idea is that you simply fire up a browser within our environment and you click through the flow. So do whatever you need to do to demonstrate to the platform that it's happening. And what it essentially does is it captures all the interactions that you've done as that user, and the underlying calls that you've made. And from that single pass, I'll just fast forward a little bit. So we're just going through the flow here. But from that single pass, what we then use is this idea that AI has built this complete journey configuration for you. So the steps, the paths, the events, the instrumentation, all of that is generated automatically. And once it's mapped, you can then apply a flagship fraud model. You can apply, one of several different bot control models and customize those policies. So it's this idea that you've got this instant coverage that can also potentially provide remediation as well. All right. Now, we've obviously got a number of panelists here that use the platform to in a number of ways. Just wanted to talk through just very quickly one real world example. So Pitney Bowes, if you're familiar with them, they are a shipping and logistics company. They actually turned to Darwinium after dealing with constant friction from an incumbent capture vendor. The classic black box problem where customers were being challenged, dropping off, and no one could actually explain who was behind each device. So these guys weren't just fighting bots, they were fighting false positives, customer frustration, and total lack of visibility into the real intent of their traffic. So what they really needed was exactly what we've been talking about today, journey level understanding and the ability to classify AI agents from malicious automation, and a way of reducing friction without sacrificing protection. I think the interesting thing was that even though we initially explored ways of augmenting their initial setup, it was actually a catalyst to them adopting Cloudflare as a CDN. I think that was really interesting because it enabled us to run fast and close to their customers. So yeah, that's one particular use case that I think is quite interesting because of the benefits that we introduced and what we managed to stop. So with that, I'm going to hand over the reins to John.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. We can hop into the next slide and get right into it. So the graph that's here is just really not a great depiction of, the types of things we deal with. So don't hone in on that. But just to give everyone a level set, Apollo is a web native and API extensible application that allows you to gather a lot of data for targeted lead generation, right? You're looking to launch a marketing campaign for your business or maybe a spear phishing campaign for your ransomware. So our platform is constantly getting hit by a number of sophisticated adversaries that are really motivated not to pay or pay a lot for our data. And that makes things challenging because we want our platform to be highly integratable into custom apps. We want to be able to support bots, we'll call them, in a lot of areas of the application. But what was particularly challenging as we built up our abuse deflection program is we need to have better insights into commonality and outcomes. So what I mean by that is we really do look at, paid user conversion or PLG. So anyone can really sign up. Anyone in this forum should be able to sign up now. And we want to drive growth and product usage that results in monetization. That was hard to have visibility into when I first started. And it was really hard to cut through the noise that we had in the multi-step process from sign up to search execution to understand what was driving conversions with all the bot noise that existed. So the way that we're leveraging Darwinium at a high level, actually, I don't even know if Ben has full awareness of some of the more recent updates, but behavioral biometrics is huge. We found that by introducing some traditional friction similar to CAPTCHAs and rate limits and other things like that, yes, of course, we saw the CAPTCHA solvers and we saw these other things that mimicked human behavior at a certain step. But quickly, if we only had a tool set up at one sort of gatekeeping location in the application, that would be defeated quickly and the value would degrade. So we're now operating in a strategy where we're trying to really up the cost for abusers and keep the cost low or invisible to the human end users and those that are legitimately operating within our terms of service. So by having behavioral biometrics in multiple steps, we can see mouse movements, really discrete interactions if it's on the front end, and mathematically calculate the likelihood of non-human activity when the client looks like it should be a human operator, right? Like a browser, some sort of agentic browser could be applicable here. So if you think about this, if we start to deflect at steps where humans should be making the interaction and the participation with our app, if we start to extend that from 1, 2, 3, or 4 locations that you may have otherwise had a CAPTCHA or something similar, we're able to essentially force them to slow down, expand the number of accounts that they use on the platform if they're doing this systemically and in an automated abuse fashion. And that costs them money. It costs them money with infrastructure. It costs them money to buy or curate the email addresses that they stand up to sign for the platform. And suddenly they're held to you can almost think of it as an extended number of rate limits that force them to even involve human operators in their abuse schemes of our platform. And it slows them down and it deflects them. So we've seen a massive reduction in scraping of the platform by not only baking in product changes and controls at those particular points, but all the things that it takes to get there. Making it really difficult to stand up those accounts comparatively. There's still a lot of work to do. We're definitely not done with that, but we're lucky that investing the time top of funnel, be it the start of a session at login or authentication, or even the creation of an API key or the creation of an account, we can take those signals and bring them downstream. So if we're on the fence about something that's going to happen, downstream, and they're starting to try to gather data from our platform, we have everything that we had even months ago. And now they need to curate accounts. They need to slow things down. They need to extend their infrastructure. We're not dependent on just a handful of signals. And it's been a lot of fun to model around this. And I'd say we're maybe 4 to 5% into the depth of the data sources that we have, not only from Darwinium, we do augment, other data sources that we need to have multiple sources of. But there's just like so much we can do. And although the problems are huge, I don't feel like we've hit any sort of limit at this point. So I'm quite excited to continue this exercise.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, John. I know we've got Connor as well, who is going to share some of his story as well with us.
Cool, thank you. So like I said, I'm from the trust and identity team in Udemy, and one of the big things we have is Udemy, if people don't know it, we are an upskilling and learning platform, and we have sort of two types of customers really. We have We have, our end users who come and buy stuff, businesses, individuals who are looking to, learn, grow their skill set and improve. And then we have our instructors. And it's, the biggest problems we face. And while we have lots of problems, some of the biggest problems are the ones we face at scale is, fake account creation and farming. And some days we see hundreds, tens of thousands of accounts being created. There was, a period where we saw somebody try to log in close to 1 million times from one device signature. Why they were doing it, who knows? So kind of the way we're leveraging Darwinium internally is to make sure that we can protect our customers so that, we sort of keep our marketplace healthy, we're keeping user interactions normal, and also protect our instructors to make sure that people aren't coming in. We're trying to reduce the account takeovers. If somebody logs in from one country, 10 times and they log in from somewhere else, that's probably not a reasonable time to let them, change their payout methods. So the big thing that we've sort of found about, bringing Darwinium internally is a lot of our sort of fraud, a lot of the way we were addressing fraud was very reactive. Something's happened, somebody's reported something. Okay, we found an incident. Let's see how we're going to address that. And Darwinium sort of gives us the tooling to look at that real time and take real time action. So instead of like having data that's 24 hours old, it's being sort of anonymized. I'm looking for data in one source here, another source here, another source in the organization. Going, okay, if I put it all in an Excel sheet, I can collate it together. I think I can see a pattern here. Instead, we can use Darwinium to say, oh, it turns out those 5,000 IP addresses actually all trace back to a single device signature. So it looks like we have one single bad actor here. So let's just ban them. And even with that sort of behavior, we see as soon as we ban something, the game shifts a little bit because it's obviously a highly incentivized game to play. So, if every time we sort of improve it, it bans, we see something like that. So kind of successes we see is like we've seen a big reduction in sort of fraudulent accounts. We're blocking more accounts being created today than sometimes we used to identify in a monthly period. And so that's been a big win. And now that we've sort of got some of the easier stuff, we're starting to leverage Darwinium to address some of our more, niche requirements and roll it out to other teams and sort of look at the more sort of payment side of it. Yeah, like that's sort of the core of it, really. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still thinking. Yeah, like I said, so yeah, obviously account revenue is sort of our biggest win and sort of reputational damage, and Darwinium is really helping us to address those problems today.
Okay. Well, I'm always glad to hear that, Connor. I know we have Vanbu, you're up next here. I can hand that over to you. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you, Michelle. I think we can move on to the next slide. I'll talk
Certainly.
about. Yeah. Thank you. So, Discourse as a platform, I think our goal is to actually empower our complete collector's journey, right? Like, so what does we mean by that is actually we allow physical musics, anything that's been ever produced, being recorded, and we also allow as a marketplace to actually buy and sell these items as well, right? Like so vinyl, CDs, and cassettes. So it offers a complete perspective of what the music is and experience it on a physical form. So when it comes down to fraud and dealing challenges with that, um, I think the biggest thing I see is there's not a putting hurdles along the way, right? Like just enough that it's easier for our users to actually get through. It doesn't feel like friction enough, but it also actually slows down, like John was referring to, right? Like, so there was more things to be put in place, and there's no one wall that we can build actually and say that like, okay, everything is secured on the platform now, right? Like, so that's no longer the case. Like, it's the layers of things that needs to be put in place, and that worked for a while, like putting more layers on the platform. But then we slowly started to realize that like when we address one, then things are popping up on another domain, right? Like, and then Connor was referring to this as well. It's not just one account anymore. There's like when we pulled one thread, there's like number of accounts that was created and just causing more friction, creating fake accounts or like posting bad reviews or like buying stuff and posting fake items for sale. There's just a multitude of accounts that exist and causing friction for our users and causing reputation to our brand as well. So where Darwinium came in to help us is actually helping us look at this not just from one user, one incident perspective, moving that to zooming out and looking at it, what a user does when they come into the platform, right? Like, so They log in, what are their attributes of their login, right? Like, is this what a user normally would do, right? Like, does this correlate to any of the other known bad actors or bad IP addresses on the platform, right? Like, so how does it scales out in relation to others? And having this information across the journey allows us to see what did they do and is this what a normal user would do, right? Like if it is not, then actually look at that and actually put measures in place, right? Like I said, put just enough friction to actually take them one extra step, right? Would they do it? And what does their action looks like, right? And this allows us to see and help the users who are actually want to be on the platform versus actually make it a little bit harder for the people who shouldn't be here, right? And what made it easy for us was like our ability to get started on this, right? Like so we were started logging information in within a couple of weeks. Right? Like we get it up and running and started collecting information and then started, I think, getting those insights to be able to see all of this information was just refreshing. The more data you have, the better informed decision you can make. So collecting more information and then adding more journeys, right? Like, so this is not like a big ta-da moment for us, right? Like, so we never went into and saying like, okay, so one day we'll open up Darwinium and all of our problems are solved. That was not the expectation. The expectation is that like we'll incrementally add more things and then get more insights and to be able to take more action that'll help us secure the platform on the long run. So um, it's been a journey for us to go through this and continue to know more about what's happening on our platform, right? The awareness was an integral part of it to know where the users are coming from, what they do, and to be able to introduce friction based on the right set of informations, right? Like, well, we're not blocking the right users, we're also creating friction for the users who shouldn't be on the platform. And to be able to do this in an incremental way was truly how we build software as well, right? Like we want to be incrementally delivering value. So this fits right into how we want to build software as well. So yeah, I'm glad I think we're on this journey and said for all the things we do for if you're a movie fan and watch comics, Marvel, you have like you have, sorry, I think this is DC. You have a Justice League, and then there's also a shadow side. So this is, I feel like, is the Justice League that actually helps focuses on protecting our users. And then there's a shadow side that keeps us up at night and continues to challenge us on how we can do it. So great to see the partners here, and thank you. That's all
Yeah.
from my end.
Thanks, Anvil. I'm sure everyone loves being referred to as a superhero. It's applicable. Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is great. Thank you all for sharing your stories. And I think we all know how difficult it is, and we're all facing similar ways of needing to kind of struggle with figuring out what's typical versus atypical, and how do we do that? So we're going to start with some questions now, and these are for all of the panelists. I think we can maybe start with you, Ben, and then see other panelists that want to chime in. But how does Darwinium define AI agents in this context, and how are they different than bots? I think that's one of the most common kind of questions we hear.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, the key differentiator here is that bots will typically follow a deterministic path, often over and over again. Agents, not so much. So you have this element of a feedback loop where essentially the agent is the eyes and the LLM is the controller. And this gives them the ability to attack problems differently. The other thing as well is that agents are acting often on behalf of a real user. So they're following the user's intent. Bots are typically programmed to do one thing and they will follow something like an attacker's attempt. So what you have at the end of the day is similar mechanics, but often a completely different purpose. And our job is really to tell which is which through classifying that.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone wants to add? Or
I think there's a hard question about how you identify them, like using a tool. Since you'll put it in better terms than me, are you able to share with the group like how you're essentially try
Yeah,
to classify these, even though it can't be done with 100% of surety, and few vendors are admitting that.
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, a lot of what we're looking at, if we look at not only the journey, but if we're looking at device and behavior alone, what you'll typically see, so when you see an agent that's reporting itself to be something like a comment, what we're looking at is the timing interactions. So if you're seeing a form being filled out, for example, looking at, the not only the is this being filled out robotically, but you're looking at things like propagation delays between those interactions. And essentially what you see there is there's a feedback loop between, obviously what the eyes are seeing and then what the brain has to make a decision on. So we're able to classify those at a high level, but then it ultimately comes down to what are they trying to do as well, which is why this adaptive policy is important, right? When you're searching for a product, as long as you're only looking within reason, you probably, if I've classified this as, a potential agent, yeah, we've got some checks and balances in place, but we obviously ultimately want to sort of let it through.
Yeah, which I think leads us in then to one of the next questions that we have, which is then, so how do we can identify them, but then how should we be thinking about building the risk frameworks in this new world of AI, and what do we need to be prepared for?
Yeah, I think on this side, there's the old story that adversaries will adapt faster than release cycles always. And AI has just given this statement a megaphone, basically. So what you have is, as we alluded to earlier in the conversation, is that you have this constant adaptation. So what you need to be doing is continuously profiling behavior, classifying and reclassifying automation, and then adapting those controls in real time. So the priority is preparing for good agents. Where good agents and bad bots can potentially look the same on the surface, and really building systems that can tell them apart and that are able to protect your key pieces of infrastructure that need protecting. I think just the real challenge there is, I've spoken to a number of folks, especially on the e-commerce side, where they've been given a business directive from the top down that everyone's going to be using this for, as the new buying tool. And so there is a propensity to be sort of letting the guard down a little bit. And I think that is certainly a dangerous precedent. So being able to classify these, I think, you know, knowing who's using your site and definitely not letting your guard down.
I think I'll chime in on this. So, haven't found a framework yet, but there's two things that I prioritized at first, and this is still part of our strategy today. The first one is like meeting with business stakeholders internally to make sure that we have some agreement on where we want to take greater risks than others. So, what part of the application should we maybe experiment with being looser versus another part of the application, and for multiple journey flows. So I established that internally earlier on, and especially when I saw that the agentic browsers were becoming commoditized, not only with tests I was doing with Darwinium, but also that were coming out from the companies that build them. Next to that, the thing I had prioritized prior to that, even before seeing this as an absolute reality, it was about the visibility. I think Ben mentioned this earlier, but if we don't know exactly what to do with it yet, we should be at least trying to track and prepare to track the outcomes and the impact that it's having on the application. So just by having understanding in the business that, yeah, we're going to maybe restrict the use of these types of tools in certain areas, but we're okay with it somewhere else. And then being able to track that and tell that story or understand what's happening with the outcomes, we're in a much better place. Even if we don't know 100% on how to solve the problems that occur, we have the tools in front of us for the most part, and then we have the data in front of us and alignment. I think without those three things, you're kind of operating without a paddle or without a boat.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I think in terms of the framework, the idea of identifying risk is probably going to be the helpful one, right? Like, so which area of the business process is in the critical path, right? Like that needs to be secured and John's point, I think like what matters most, right? Like I think continuously refining it and making sure the toleration level for that, identifying that is going to be helpful. So you can focus on securing an entire app is going to be largely impossible. We can put controls around it, like, but securing every aspect of everything is going to be nearly impossible. So we have to identify what's critical, what is in the critical path that needs to work every single time, right? Like this, every time I click a button, it has to go through the transaction, right? Like there's no two ways about it. Like how do we secure that, right? Like and expanding that, using the information on what the interaction is available on every other aspect of the site that they interact with, and using that to make judgment on the critical path would be helpful. But it starts off by identifying what's important for the business to run and what is the risk tolerance for each of those looks like. That helps us to put in an action plan that'll actually help us implement that.
Totally agree.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I
I'll
think
jump. Sorry, go on.
sorry. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd add to that as well. It's like for some parts of our business, sort of like building frameworks and stuff, it's like, we don't mind as much sometimes users scripting in certain areas and using bots, but there's certain interactions with our platform that, it doesn't matter if you're using agentic AI or, bots, or it's somebody scripted home. We're just not really interested in that, that kind of interaction because it, causes like reputational damage, or it's just causing, sort of high volume nonsense. So it's like, it's in some ways like some of the AI stuff, it's not that different because we're just not interested in those kind of interactions. So we're still going to be looking to sort of block them at that sort of level.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, and that then kind of on to the flip side, I think then leads us into one of our next questions. And just as a reminder too, at any time you can always add questions that you have, additional questions to any of those in the audience via the Q&A panel. These are some frequently asked ones that we have here, which is what are some of the ways that others within the fintech vertical have done to go about balancing automation against control? And specifically on that flip side, how do we onboard more good users?
Yeah, I think what's interesting here, and certainly the fintechs that I've worked with, the ones that have been successful are really balancing automation and control by moving away from rigid checkpoints and towards this adaptive decisioning. I think one of the other challenges with um, with things like fintech is that often at sign up there is an element of KYC friction. So determining, I think in particular, when you're onboarding more good users, it's really when you have your KYC checks in place, should I be implementing them? Yes. But at what point do I implement them, and how do I avoid, draining my budget when I'm doing something like KYC or IDV? When you've got a clearly, automated bot user that has just the intention is to create a synthetic account. It's done no browsing beforehand. Do you want to actually, go through the cost of adding that friction? So, um, yeah, this idea of pushing friction only to the small percentage that actually warrants that scrutiny.
And then I think one of the next ones that we have here is there anything you have found that is working this year that, that is not working this year that was working last year? Or any changes that we're seeing?
I think this would be a good one for Ambu and
Yeah.
Connor and John.
Yeah.
I think what I've seen is what I started with, which is like the measures we have put in place in terms of restricting IP addresses or actually putting captchas, and all of this has been solved. And IP addresses become probably one of the least valuable commodities now. It's easy for people to get a new IP address, and then when you block one, another one pops up within seconds. So I think this is where the ability to combine informations and what they do is going to be more important for us than just looking at it one action on its own. That used to work, and that it was no fault of its own. It's just this cost of innovation, right? Like we all want to experience AI, but there's also the challenges comes along with this. But yeah, I think that I felt like probably was pretty helpful in the previous years, but this year is not so much.
Yeah, I think for us, it's been a large moving away from sort of like historical, what people would use as Cloudflare rules and bot scores and ban this IP address or ban that region. And, there's very sort of, okay, we see a problem, let's talk about it, let's make a commit, let's push it out to the cloud, let's deploy it on Cloudflare. Okay, we blocked that customer, and, a week later they're back at it. It's like being able to use sort of Darwinium tooling to look behind the screen and say, okay, this is one device from many IP addresses, or it's repeated behavior from certain domains and certain signups or referral links. It's that ability to respond instantaneous to go, hey, there's a spike in traffic from this source, and we're just going to say, hey, we're just gonna block that. And especially when it can be outright fraudulent behavior, it's like being able to adapt quickly and respond. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you implement, people seem to figure out a workaround quite shortly afterwards. So it's being sort of less rigid and more being like, we're just going to block repeated behavior and not worry too much about sort of the concrete rules and sources.
Yeah, I'll chime in here too. I think a lot of the like verification or off platform, off app steps that we previously would rely on, like email verification, you have to click a link. The extensibility or the simplicity of linking all these different things together in a script or truly using a custom agent makes it trivial. So we have to think about what actually needs to be done here if we're using a traditional control, and we can A/B test whether or not that's working based on the outcomes. So, basic verifications, anything that's available out there to easily be created or stolen off platform isn't even super reliable anymore. It has to be something that's in some way that you can validate, right? Like in my case, it's not an ID, but that's an example of something that's a little bit harder to generate. If you're truly relying on validation, it is frictionful, but if that's a requirement like ID ver, that's still a little bit harder to create and actually validate if you're not just basing it on the image. And in addition to all of that, just as the others said, yeah, challenges are super dead. We foresaw that a long time ago, and we knew that was happening. But the prevalence of CAPTCHA defeaters, challenge defeaters, it's just like it's not even something that's considered for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, Ben.
I just said absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think then, I mean, that really kind of then leads us into, one of the final ones here. I know we're very much up on time, but as people are looking to figure out what they're going to be doing as this is all moving and advancing so quickly, knowing just how important speed is with this and getting a solution that can help here up and running. Ben, just to give us kind of an idea of how long it typically takes to implement a use case with Darwinium or any of the others of examples that they have, I think would be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're adding a new use case and you've already had the initial integration, there's this idea that you can at least get observability on a new use case within hours. So essentially by going through configuration, mapping out the key data points. So if I'm looking at, say, like a registration, being able to map that through to attributes, this idea that you can at least get some insight into what's happening very quickly. Now, obviously, implementing policies, if it's an obtuse use case where we don't have a flagship model, building that policy will take longer. So that is, of course, adding a new use case. Obviously, there is the initial setup, which can vary depending on the complexity of your team and just how siloed it is. There obviously has to be some buy-in from your infrastructure team to actually trust putting something at that at the CDN level. But yeah, it's certainly hours. I don't know whether the panel has anything to say to that. You guys typically go through a process where you run it through staging, you test out whether it's working properly. I don't know whether there's anything you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, I think for us to get started on just from zero, ground zero, I think it was like a sprint or about that to get us started on the first case, which was like logging the information to be able to see what's happening there. And then we continue to add use cases one at a time. I think that worked for us. I would definitely recommend when you're starting off, like rather than trying to solve all the problems, start with one to get to know familiar with the platform and ease into the workflow of things and how does it actually fit into your rest of your team's day to day, right? Like it shouldn't introduce friction. Just making sure that it starts slow and then you can add more things feels like the easier way to get value out of the tool and the platform as well.
100%.
Yeah. That was great. And I know we are actually over on time here now. So we can go ahead, and I do have my email address here. So if anyone does have additional questions, please feel free to send them my way. I do want to thank all of the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us and for sharing all of the fabulous information. And we will post the recording. So thank you all for taking time out of your day as well to attend. And we will see you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks.